Before we go any further, let's just clarify it now and just answer the question. No, Sarah J Maas is not the progenitor of romantasy. That being said, where did romantasy actually stem from? Like, what are its roots? And why is it actually so popular? My friend and I had a bit of a discussion, and this actually came up. So, yeah, it's time that we get into romantasy. Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome back to my channel. And for those of you who are new, welcome in general. Now, I know before we start, people are just like, where the heck did she get this from? But no. There was actually a lot of conversation, and it's not like I know romantasy top to bottom, but that didn't sound right. So, I got a bit curious, and I started looking into really what are the roots of romantasy, especially because romantasy is on the rise. Romantasy is taking over everything. Everyone wants a bit of romance in their fantasy, a bit of fantasy in their romance, and people are just like, they're gobbling it up. That's all well and good, but I really want to actually get into it, truly. And, for those of you who have been with us for a minute, you probably have noticed that I've been like shooting out polls at you in the last week. That's kind of an experiment that I'm running. I know I run a lot of experiments, but I'm really just trying to see what works. A lot of the poll questions are from topics that we've discussed on this channel, or just topics I would like to discuss in the future, or that I've been thinking about, or that I've been seeing discourse on for a while. And really, it's just a way to kind of like see what you guys are thinking. So I love that you guys are engaging. I love that you guys are leaving your comments. Yes, I've been responding to as many as I can, while also just reading sometimes when I'm just like, some people are just dropping their comments here, and it's really, really lovely to see. I'm going to keep doing it for a bit, see how you guys like it, but do let me know in the comments. Do you guys like the polls? Do you want a bit more? Do you want a bit variety? Like, just let me know as always. But let's get into the topic at hand, and that is romantasy. First and foremost, let's define it. What is romantasy? And I think it's kind of like very easy, but really, yeah, it's just like a genre of literature that blends romance and fantasy together all in one, easy as. And obviously, with romantasy, it includes the tropes of both a romance novel and a fantasy novel. So yeah, so you're gonna get, the tropes that you would normally see in romance, as well as the tropes that you would normally see in fantasy, which is, an interesting element, and also something that, makes people actually gravitate towards it. But let's actually discuss, like, where did this, like, romantasy actually stem from? Like, does Sarah J Maas actually have a role to play? And I think one of the best things to do is actually even take a historical view. I don't usually take historical views when it comes to discussions, because there's a lot of history, guys. Come on, like, we've been on this earth for ages, and there's just a lot has happened. And I'm not ever going to claim to be like, a history buff. I do like my history, but there's a lot of dates, a lot of people, like, it's just a lot of things going on. So I never claim to know, everything in history, but I know a fair amount. Especially when I was looking into this, I got to know it a bit more as well. And so I'm just going to share what I've learned, and then also, yeah, just jump into the discussion, and you guys can also let me know what you think. So first and foremost, in terms of romantasy and where romantasy gets its roots in, romantasy has its roots in history. It's not a recent thing. Like, it's a recent thing in the context that we're seeing it now. Like, because, everything has changed, but that's not just the romantasy genre. That's literally everything. But we can go as far back as like the 18th and 19th century. Like, I'm sure we can go further back than that, but that is where I that is where I was at when I was doing the research. That's where I started. So the 18th and 19th century, that is like the century of Gothic literature. And you know what? I'm all for it. But in this time, with the books that you were seeing, you would actually see quite a lot of elements of romance being blended in with elements of the supernatural in horror. And we see that from books written by the likes of Mary Shelley and Anne Radcliffe. And they would write these books, with these mixed blends, and they would obviously set it in a beautiful backdrop of, like, this eerie landscape, or this, like, beautiful castle. And the minute I saw eerie landscape and beautiful castle, I'm just like, that's already a fantasy novel. Let's be real. But yeah, so in the 18th and 19th century, early 19th century, like with these gothic literatures, like it was very, very common to have like both of these blends. So it's not directly fantasy and it's not directly romantasy, like, but you would see like that, small bits of it, like small bits of fantasy creeping into romance. And then if we go a bit further on, like, deeper into the 19th century, we emerge into the Victorian era. And in the Victorian era, romance was all the rage. Like, people were obsessed with romance. It was the popularity of it, like, it just became extremely popular. But the romances in the Victorian era were like the romances, with like just idealistic storylines. And I don't blame them. I'm just like, I love a bit of idealism. I just, come on, I'm a fantasy reader. I love to get, idealistic all the time. I go through trauma with the fantasy books I read to get to the idealistic end, but I like it all the same. But yeah, in the Victorian era, romances were very, very popular. Great idealistic endings with these books. And with these books, obviously you would have these just amazing, once again, amazing backgrounds, amazing castles, amazing like just environments, obviously, in the books. And while in this era there was more of a focus on romance, even in these books there would sometimes be, mystical elements. So sometimes they would have like mystical encounters or ghosts, but that's as far as it went. So, in the 19th century, when we got to the Victorian era, we didn't really see, romantasy. So the little bits and bobs that we probably saw a glimpse of in the Gothic era, like, it kind of just like more dissipated. It's not like it wasn't there, but in terms of its popularity and its presence, it really just wasn't. We weren't seeing it. And then obviously we move forward, and then we find ourselves in the 20th century. And this century is probably a century I would have enjoyed, because here in the 20th century we see fantasy actually become like a distinct genre on its own. Like, literally before, you would have elements of it here and there in other genres, but right now it now has become its own distinct recognized genre. Like, people have recognized it as its own genre, the fantasy genre. And this is where people like J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis were mucking it up. They came here and they just said, listen here, we're taking over. And that's so amazing, because they really just pioneered a new era of storytelling and pioneered this new era of fantasy that we were in, where it was recognized and it was just distinct on its own. And so they were just telling amazing stories, amazing tales of epic adventures in magic, with amazing fantastical creatures. And the story revolved around these fantastical elements, without, a focus on romance. Sure, romance can be in it, but the main parts of their stories was the fantasy, because once again, fantasy had become its own distinct genre at this point. So this is why I'm just like, I would have really enjoyed it. And so they were really, really, they were setting off, they were taking off. And you know what? I applaud them. I'm just like, you know what? We love a good trailblazer out here in these streets. Yeah. And then take it on to, a bit more of the late 20th century, and then, a bit, late 20th century, and even early 21st century. This is where romantasy really makes an emergence. Romantasy really emerges as an actual, like it's like the term itself hasn't been claimed yet, but you are actually seeing it in terms of the principle of it, the idea of it. You're actually seeing it, because this is what people were wanting. People were wanting a mix. People wanted to read things that had fantastical elements but also had romance, which is why series like, Cushiel's Legacy and Outlander blew to the proportions which they did. And honestly, it was these series that actually kind of like contributed to more so the emergence of like, the idea of romantasy, because people enjoyed the series so much, and they enjoyed it for the reasons that they had those two elements in it, like the clear elements of fantasy and the clear elements of romance, but also distinct elements coming together and working together and making this amazing story. They loved that. And so the books like those were like drawing people in. And so romantasy as an idea in the literature industry became more popular. And you know what? All power to them. Once again, we love a good trailblazer. And then we enter the 21st century. We're deep in it. And then, you have like the present day authors that we have now, engaging in romantasy. Now, if you are listening to what I've been saying, you saw like, the little glimpses of like, romantasy, coming up in, 18th, 19th century. But then you saw its real emergence in the 20th century before SJM even had a release out there in these streets. Okay. So why now are they saying that, well, she's the founder of romantasy, or the romantasy era was because of SJM? It's because when we hit the 20, like I said, in the 20th century is where it became more popular. In the 21st century is where, when something just starts off and it pulls people in, but then someone takes that momentum and rocks with it. Yeah, that's essentially what happened. SJM came and basically, she came with her series, obviously the Throne of Glass series, and then obviously she's been writing series ever since. And in these series, it was just so clear that romantasy is what we're going for here. Like, this is fantasy, but the romance is so important and so integral to the story. And then around this point, especially like when she fully blew and she became like, this popular fantasy author, but then they're just like, is she a fantasy author? There's that question of, is she a fantasy author? But because like these books, yes, they are fantasy, but they're really touching on romance. And then time kept going, and then the term was coined. The romantasy term was coined. So we can say that in her prime, the romantasy era, came to be known as the romantasy era. And obviously, as one of the authors who's at the top of writing that specific genre, that specific type of book, when they now coin the term romantasy, and she's the one who's selling all these books, she's the one who's actually drawing an audience for these books, yes, we are going to attribute romantasy to this author. Like, it's no surprise, let's be real. When I was making my example in the early century, when fantasy became its own genre, and it was J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis that were really like leading the charge. They weren't the only people writing fantasy, of course, but they were the ones who were really hitting it hard. They were the ones who really kind of like set in stone that this is a distinct genre that people are loving, and that's absolutely amazing. In the moment where people were like craving romantasy that followed on from the 20th century, she took that momentum and she ran with it. But that's not to say that she did something wrong, but it's more to say that she took advantage of what was happening, and her marketing team obviously took advantage of what was happening, and that term was coined, and she was like the face of romantasy, and that's who she is now, the face of romantasy. But to say that Satah J Maas created romantasy, that's a stretch. So when I saw that, I was just like, that's a stretch. But the entire, like, I remember when me and my friend were talking about it, like how we got to this, like, it was a tumbleweed. Like, honestly, we were throwing in topics, and the fact that we ended up on romantasy and stuff like that was hilarious. But then the topic that kind of like preceded that one, so there were a lot of topics, but the specific topic I think that preceded that was when we were talking about how there's just been a change in fantasy, and like fantasy isn't just fantasy anymore. But that's the thing. Fantasy is fantasy. But then we are seeing a huge rise in romantasy, to the point that when people pick up a fantasy book, it's actually romantasy, because most fantasy books now actually include so many elements of romance that it is it's a 50-50 split between romance elements and fantasy elements. And at that point, you are a romantasy book. And so when people actually write, and a lot of people nowadays, when they're writing fantasy, because we are now in this era where like romance kind of like has taken over so many things, and like especially with romantasy, growing to the point that it has, for the people who are writing, a lot of them might have even grown up in this era where they're just witnessing like a lot of romance being put together with fantasy, that in writing their own, they can't even, they put all those elements as well. But obviously they're saying, I'm writing a fantasy book. Half your book is about the relationship between your two protagonists, or your protagonist and your antagonist. I don't know, the type of matching that they're doing. Like, half of your book is actually about the romance. So at that point, it's not a full fantasy book. And so me and my friend was just going back and forth. We were discussing how really like fantasy has changed. But this is the thing. Real fantasy hasn't changed. People are still writing straight up fantasy where, like, we're not going to say that it won't have romantical elements, that people won't have relationships in that book, and that won't be part of the storyline. But you know what? 10%, maybe 20%. But the romance storyline is not taking up 40-50% of the book, even sometimes 60% of the book, let's be real. No. Because at that point, that book is a romantasy book. And I think what's the issue here is not that romance is taking over. It's fantasy. It's more so that people are really just categorizing books wrongly. Like, I'm so sorry to say, like, the amount of books I've been seeing that's just like, oh, it's a fantasy book, and I'm just like, you are a fantasy book, you're a romantasy book, which is still fantasy, but romantasy. You really just gotta set it out clear. And the thing is, I understand that romantasy itself is like a freshly coined term. Let's be real. It's not like it's been here for ages. And I'm like, while we, people in literature, and yes, I count content creators who do bookish content as people in literature. While people in literature and in the literature industry, while we probably we're used to it, so we recognize that as a common word, like that's normal to us. I'm just like, well, is it like properly recognized, properly recognized as its own genre? Is that why people keep mistaking romantasy for fantasy, for straight up fantasy? Because fantasy now has like, it's grown so much from when it initially came out. It has so many subgenres. But I'm like, it's one thing to have like YA fantasy. I can say that that's kind of like a subgenre of fantasy. I can kind of see that because, all the elements will be, of a fantasy book. But then obviously, it's their rating on that book. They won't have certain content, certain material, certain language in that book because it's designated for being for the YA audience. Same with middle grade. So I would consider those to be like genre, like subgenres, subsets of the fantasy genre. But I'm just like, even epic fantasy, I'm just like, you know what? Still fantasy genre, but then we know with epics, there's so much more that goes with it. We expect more word count, we expect more world building, we expect like, so much more to the plot in the storyline. But I'm just like, is romantasy its own genre now? And I think that's where the issue is, because I'm like, is romantasy not its own genre? But because obviously it was made by like two genres coming together, I can understand people are just like, no, it's still a subset. But I'm just like, it's a subset of two genres. Guys, it's its own genre. I think right now we actually need to decide, and not even decide, we need to declare that romantasy is its own genre. And that's not a problem. But I'm just like, when you're telling me this is a fantasy book, but half of this book is romance, I mean, it's not like the book was bad, but half of this book was just centered around their relationship. I would really have enjoyed if they were looking for something or going on a quest or defeating some mythological, creature. I would really appreciate that. But half of this book was really just centered on them and their up and down, or them down and up, or them finding each other. And that's great. Like, let's be real. Some of my favorite books are romantasy. Like, I'm not even bashing romantasy, but I'm just like, when we're now selling romantasy as fantasy, straight fantasy, it gets annoying when we find that there was too much romance on it, and then you now have people saying that that fantasy has changed. I don't believe that fantasy in itself has changed. I believe the industry and what the market wants has changed, and that happens all the time. Like, market desire, market demand is ebbing and flowing all the time, and that's completely fair. With depending on which generation you find yourself in, which decade you find yourself in, that's completely normal. But to say that things have changed, I don't think that things have changed. I just think that right now we are not being very clear about what is what. We're not being very clear about what can be found where, and we're really just lost. So I think we really just need to, just like fantasy had its own, moment of distinction in the 20th century, I think about now is the time that we can fully, just make a distinction that romantasy is romantasy. And all of these romantasy books who you have been masquerading as one single fantasy book, please collect yourself over there. Maybe we can discuss what the threshold should be in terms of like what classifies a fantasy book as a romantasy book. Actually, I'm giving it 30 to 40%. You're majorly romance. You need to collect yourself and go over there. Romantasy is your portion, and there's nothing wrong with that. But stop lying to yourself. You belong in that area. All that to say, we've established the history. We've seen kind of like where, why people are saying that Sham is like, the progenitor of romantasy. She not, but all right. But the actual romantasy genre itself, like, let's actually discuss like why people love it so much, because obviously it started to be really popular end of 20th century, and then that momentum kept going, and then obviously now we're at, like, I think we're at its peak. Like, I don't know how popular can romantasy grow. Do you think like it'll actually like become like the top genre one day? Like, I don't know, like, have it hit its peak? I don't, you know what, I don't think it's hit its peak. I think we can go further. We probably can go further. Let's see how the next few years go by, the next decade, and then we can probably decide. But why is it so popular? But as someone who, a lot of my favorite, books have been, romantasy, like I said, a fantasy book masquerading as a romantasy book masquerading as a fantasy book. You know, that's all right. But from someone, yeah, who's had romantasy that, she loves, and she really actually does love that genre. I think it's actually kind of like really, really easy to see why it's actually grown in the popularity that it has. Romance and fantasy on their own are two of the most popular genres. Take these two and slapping them together, it is a formula for greatness. Let's be real. And there's a reason like these two are popular. So obviously fantasy, one, the escapism that it provides to everyone. We don't like this world half the time, we want to escape, and I think obviously romantasy kind of not obviously fantasy appeals to, that childlike wonder that you have, exploring different places, different things, and obviously these mythological creatures that, we a lot of times wish were real. Some of them, not all of them, some of them would definitely wipe us out 100%. But you have these like literally fantastical elements that we can't resist, because they really just they elicit this emotion out of us, that excitement, that joy, that wonder, that and so there's no doubt why fantasy is like, has such a, wide audience in terms of like people who enjoy reading. And not just that, it's like the tropes in fantasy themselves. Like, there's a trope that appeals to everyone's personal like preference, to everyone's personality, like everything that you could desire, everything that you could imagine. And you know what, there is a trope for that, and it's absolutely amazing. Fantasy, one of the tropes in fantasy that is very, very popular in fantasy, something I will say is that it's not only found in fantasy, but it's mostly in fantasies, and always amazing, is found family. And found family is amazing because you in fantasy, usually what happens is we have saved the world together, we've defeated this chaos together, and found family, it's absolutely amazing. But like the strictly fantastical tropes, fantasy tropes, obviously epic quest, the quest for knowledge, chosen one, obviously lost heirs. Definitely lost heirs are definitely one of my, like, I think are absolutely amazing ideas. Magic schools, let's be real, let's look in the past. Magic schools took off at the beginning of, like, what was it, the 2000s, or yeah, around the 2000s. Literally at the beginning of the 21st century, magic schools were taking off because the idea is so amazing. And it's just like, wow, it's one of those things that I wish I could go, because remember, let's be real, everyone was waiting for their Hogwarts letter. Everyone was trying to find out where to catch that cab to end up in Camp Half Blood. One way or another, people were going to end up there, one way or another. But like the magic school trope is obviously absolutely amazing. There are some tropes that really kind of just center the villains, or the antagonists in the story, and they're always like really, really fun, chaotic but fun. But with all of these amazing tropes, come on, like you have, like, the secret prophecies, all of these great things. This is why everyone, not everyone, but this is why so many people flock to fantasies. Now let's look at romance. We as humans, I think a lot of the reason why a lot of people flock to romance is because romance appeals to kind of like the human nature. Humans, we weren't made to really be without each other. We were made to kind of be interdependent. We were made to kind of flock to one another, which is why most humans, you find yourself just in community. We were made for community. Like, we weren't made to be separate. So everyone's always looking for love, everyone's looking for their soulmate, everyone's looking for friends. Like in primary school, like obviously, like, to be the person without friends was really just an isolating experience, and it was so heart-wrenching if you didn't have a friend. Humans were made like to be with one another in, different forms, and friendship, in or in a romantic way, or even like, fraternal way. And so with romance novels, it appeals to one of these, it appeals to, like, this just natural part of humans, like something that's a part of us, like that need to be with someone and to have like that emotional connection with someone and that deep connection with someone. And then they throw in their own kind of like just awesome tropes. Now that to be said, I said it on this channel before. I definitely believe that the Victorian era romances, the ones where they had those idealistic, romances, they were hidden. They were hidden, which is why I don't particularly read romances this day and age. You guys know I don't read that much romance. And that's because, like, yes, romance today has a lot of tropes, and a lot of them I do not like. A lot of them I do not like. I'm just like, this. And some of them I'm just like, why are you guys calling us fantastical? Do you guys see what tropes these are? These are some of the most ridiculous things. Like, never in hell. You know what? I would believe a dragon would emerge before I would believe some of the things in these romance books. I'm just like, just call yourself a fantasy at this point. Why are you like, we're not fantasies at this point. At this point, I could probably go on some of the quests in the books I read if we're being honest. 100%. But these ones, some of y'all, like the billionaire romances, guys. I know you guys want to be idealistic, but I'm sorry, that's gone from idealistic to full on Delulu. Like, just please, I'm telling you now. I've read some quests in my books that I can guarantee I can figure out how to go on them. But for some of you to secure that billionaire the way that they're securing these billionaires in these books and the things that are that are happening in these books, guys, just please, that's not even Delulu. We need a new word for that, because please, no, release it. And it also has you guys in bondage. Please stop. I'm sorry. But also also, like, just the classic romance tropes that people have come to know and love. Friends to lovers, which I always think is a super cute trope, because I'm just like, oh, especially the childhood friends to lovers thing, absolutely adorable. Enemies to lovers. Now, I really think I should make another video on this, because we need to discuss what enemies to lovers are, because some of these authors are coining, like, are classing their books as enemies to lovers, and I'm just like, no, enemies to lovers, we need to do it right. I want you to hate each other, okay? And we really need to go into the type of hate, the level of hate that needs to be had for it to be classified as an enemy to lover, because you are my enemy, which means I'm expecting you to want me dead, I'm expecting you to not be able to breathe the same air that I'm breathing. You shouldn't be able to stand being in my presence. You should really just plot on my downfall at every single moment that you have a chance. These people, these are dislikers to lovers. Like, that is dislikers to lovers. Like, we really need to be honest with it. So enemies to lovers, when it's done correctly, best trope. Like, especially, this is why in romantasy, or even in fantasy with, like, like a 10% romance element, they can do enemies to lovers well. Because I have seen some people try to kill each other and then end up as lovers. That is true enemies. You tried to murder me. Yes. I was your enemy. You see how that works? Oh, I don't like you because, I just don't think you're cool. The vibes are off. That's a disliker, please. You're not with it. You're not with it. Because, like, you want to know the type of enemy that we gotta have in enemies to lovers? I hate the way that you walk, the way that you talk. I hate the way that you dress. I hate the way that you sneak this if I catch fire. Guys! Oh, that is the type of hate that you need to have in enemies to lovers. You have to be a hater. A hater. Some of these books, y'all don't be hating correctly. Not at all. And we have veered off course. Let's go back. But you take these, like, tropes, like, these tropes that people love, and from romance, and tropes that people love from fantasy, and you stick them together, and of course you're going to end up with a sick book. Because with romantasy, and this is why I keep saying that, some fantasy books are not fantasy, you are romantasy, the elements have to be split. Like, half the book has to be focusing on, like, the romantic element, and then half the book is focusing on the fantasy element, Like, legit, half of this book, if it's like enemies to lovers and chosen one, I want to see something about, kidnapped the chosen one from a different kingdom, and then he's trying to transport, or she's trying to transport him to her kingdom so that, you know, he won't fulfill the prophecy or something. And on the way, like, they're trying to kill each other and then fall in love, and then they fulfill the prophecy together. Like, I want to see that's what I want to see, you know? That's what I want to see. And that's such an amazing plot. And like, you have all the elements of the romance and all the elements of the fantasy. Did you guys hear that idea? Even me, I heard it. I'm just like, Shelley, you should write something like that. That's cool. That's cool. Because I threw in about 4 tropes in there. Like, honestly, that's 4. Because let's be real, there's gonna be extra tropes in there. There's gonna be forced proximity in there as well. Like, come on. Like, we had chosen one ancient prophecy. Like, come on. That book was slap. That book was slap. 100% that book was slap. I'll get back to you guys on that. I might write that book because that book was slap for real. But that aside, let's just move on, because we about to veer left. That aside, you look at these elements, and of course you're just like, that book, like I said, that book is gonna slap because it has like more elements. And so it's no wonder why romantasy is taking over. It's no wonder why romantasy is really just snatching the girl's edges. Like, it's no wonder. But we really just need we really need to call a spade a spade. You know, we're calling everything over here, and it's not right. You know, we call it SJM, you know, the one who, you know, who created the romantasy, error. Stop that. You know, we call it romantasy, fantasy, error. Stop that. Like, we just need to get our ducks in a row, you know. Let's be real. We're grown, you know, we're not kids anymore. We know what to do. We know what's wrong. We know what's right. Stop playing games. But that is it for now, guys. You know, we've gone through a brief history of romantasy. We've gone through where that, you know, where the idea of, you know, the creator came from. And we've gone through why people actually want it, you know. And that's all well and good. That's all well and good. It's absolutely amazing. I'm going to, like, you know, make sure that I create like a new list in my Benable of just like great romantasies that I love, so that you guys can really just enjoy the books that I've been enjoying, you know, and see like why, if you haven't tried romantasy before, if you don't like it, see why that book slaps, see why that book is, you know, see why that genre is on there. But it is its own genre. But you know what, that's it for today. We've discussed, and I hope you've enjoyed. If you are new here, this is actually the vibe over here. Sometimes we start real structured. Sometimes we start real calm. And then, honestly, the hands start moving left, right, and center. I speak my hands a lot, as you can tell. The hands start moving. The voice starts getting higher. Like, the head, it starts to bop. But, you know, we have fun. We have fun. And this was actually a calm discussion, I would think, because we weren't discussing any of the drama, because there's been a lot of drama, but we're just going to ignore it. Like, genuinely, we're going to pretend like it's not happening at all. And we're really just discussing like the book world. But you know what, guys, let's end it here. As always, do be sure to like, you know, because come on, boost your girl. You guys know you love me. Share, because your friends will love me. Comment, because I want to know what you think. Like, do you like fantasy? Do you like romance? Do you like romantasy? Do you avoid all 3? Are you a thriller girly or horror girly? Like, where you at? Like, let me know. And really just let me know your thoughts on the whole, like, you know, just romantasy as a genre, and how it's like, you know, it's on the rise, it's continuing to rise. You know, let me know some of your faves, you know, some of your favorite romantasies, your favorite romantasy authors as well. Like, just let me know in the comments. And last but not least, if you haven't already, do be sure to hit that subscribe button. Make sure you have that bell on so that you get notifications as always. And I will see you next time. Bye, guys. I hate the way that you walk, the way that you talk. I hate the way that you dress. I hate the way that you sneak. This, if I catch flies, it's gonna be... Kendrick was You know what, guys? For those of you who stuck around, for reasons I know not, but if you actually stuck around, let's discuss. You know, what's going on this year? All the rappers are beefing. First of all, Chris abused Quavo, because in only 2 minutes, Quavo, it really needs to accept that L, because Quavo's response was weak. I'm so sorry, it was weak. Please, sir, like, we're not playing that game. And then Kendrick. You know, and I've been saying this, like, J. Cole is wise. Like, he knew when to bow out. He was just like, I'm not even with this mess. Like, I'm not trying to partake. And then after that, Kendrick said, I am going for throats. I want war. And you know what's so funny? What I love about this is that they're my two favorites in terms of like Kendrick and J. Cole. So the whole, honestly, the diss, I loved it. I'm just like, Drake, I'm so sorry. Personally, I couldn't care less about you. So personally, I am I am really enjoying this. I'm also really kind of wanting for Kendrick to drop the full 13 minutes. Forgive me, 17 minutes. Like whatever it was. I want to hear all of it because we thought 6 minutes was a lot. What else was you saying? Like, what else do you got? Because no. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that your friends told you to aim right and you didn't. But this time you come in correct. And so if you still got a few minutes out there that you ain't dropped, sir, that means you didn't come full on. Drop it, drop it, drop it. This is not a rap page. I don't think it's ever going to be a rap page. But you know what? This page has discussed drama before. Book drama, sure, but it's discussed drama nonetheless. That being said, this counts as drama, but I don't want to set a precedent. But you know what, guys? Maybe we can call this like the after chats, after we've discussed all the cute things or the bookish drama or whatever we were talking about in the video prior, we can now start to discuss what's going on in the world. Maybe we can discuss some pop culture. It's cool. It's cool. We can do that. I can, like, maybe I should start a Patreon and, we can discuss everything like this. You guys, let me know what you think. I truly don't know how we ended up here. Oh, yes, it's because that one line from that track has not left my head. I'm just like, I thought Chris was bad, but Kendrick. And the thing is, that's not the worst thing he said on that track, yo. Disrespectful. Oh, goodness. I'm actually gonna go now, guys. I'm not gonna keep you guys. Let's just go. I know y'all love me. I love y'all too, but let's just go. I'm actually getting like, yeah, let's just go. Let's leave it at that. But also, like, for those who stuck around, let me know what y'all been thinking about this rap beef, because it's a lot in it. It's a lot. And I don't know what's coming up next because they don't look like they're about to stop. Like, is someone else gonna come out beefing? Like, what do you think? What's the next beef, y'all? But let me know what y'all think. What y'all thought about Kendrick bars? Like, even bring Chris in here. What y'all thought about him? Like, because that entire diss track was disrespectful. It was rude from beginning to end, and I honestly loved it so much. Like, loved it so much because let's be real, people forgot who Breezy was. People forgot he was a bit crazy. He let them know. But we're done. I'm gonna see you guys next time. Okay. Maybe we'll have after chats as well, but for now, no. This is probably the one and only time I'm doing this, but yeah, it was fun. Goodbye, guys. For real this time.